There is just way too many awesome games coming out. It's pretty much impossible to try and keep up, especially when you think about the fact that pretty much every single week now we're getting huge, epic releases, experiences that are absolutely worth your attention. But the problem is, there's also so much cool retro stuff I want to play. Like this week I'd just been goofing off with this super cool Game Boy Advance with a backlight that a friend of mine made. Well, I want to try and begin a new series. As many of you know, if you've been subscribed for a bit, I like to do my really big deep dive reviews, where I have like a 10-minute video that explains combat and story and DLC if I have to, and really gets into why a game is great. But what's funny is, there is a ton of stuff I play that I normally don't get a chance to talk about at all. Throughout the course of a typical month, there's a lot of additional stuff that I sit down and try for at least a couple hours just to see what it's like when I'm not doing the big reviews. And a lot of times, these end up really impressing me as well. I just don't have the time to do a full-blown review of it. So I want to try and invent a new series where I could give you basically a synopsis and some ideas of what I liked or disliked about smaller games that I think still completely deserve our attention. So this is going to be a new freaking thing I'm going to be experimenting with called Great Games You Might Have Missed. And this is going to be the very first episode where we're going to be digging into the 6 cool things that came out in June that perhaps you didn't play. First up, of course, we got to talk about Cadence of Hyrule, which is perhaps one of the biggest surprises of 2019. Not just because they dropped it on us relatively randomly, but because it works so well, despite the fact that it looks so freaking weird. So this is a rhythm-based game that takes place in the Legend of Zelda universe, where keeping the beat and making sure your tempo is on point is just one key to survival. It's sort of strategic simultaneously. You need to keep in mind where you're stepping, where you're attacking, and which of your items is beginning to break down, because it's really kind of a very focused action game. You need to worry about a lot of different stuff at once, but part of it is just being good at the combat, being able to slash and dodge in a very good sequence of blows. And something about this that I think is extra interesting is the soundtrack is some of the best Nintendo music I have ever heard in my life. It is just so good, I cannot stop blasting it. But secondary, the game is randomized. Sections of it are constantly being reshuffled, so every time you turn it on and start a new file, you really don't know exactly what you're getting. But what makes this really impressive is that the bricks that the universe is built upon are so solid that even when it is being shuffled all around you, you don't particularly notice. It creates such a seamless randomization that it seems like every single journey is being hand-built when that's not really what's happening. But funny enough, I feel like this actually does relate to another indie game that came out this month, which was called My Friend Pedro. It feels like a game that is if every single action movie you've ever heard of decided to get together and create a single perfect baby. In My Friend Pedro, you go through a series of maps, and each one is essentially an impossible shootout. Times where you're having to bounce bullets off pans, flip through windows, kick down doors, and try and skateboard if you have to, all to try and have the ultimate style points. Now this game is unfortunately very short. It can be beaten in 3 to 4 hours, but instead of trying to stretch it out or create some artificial length, My Friend Pedro just locks its sights on the singular vision of being epic, of making sure that every shootout feels like the craziest thing you have ever seen in your life. There are times when I'm literally trying to zipline off one building and reloading my gun and getting ready for that next hit, or jumping on a motorcycle and driving through a tunnel while just flipping around and trying to do stunts as I kill every single bad guy around me. It really sort of builds its own formula and own pacing, where it makes it basically say, hey, we're doing something different. Hey, Pedro is trying to do something so crazy that you need to see it and play it to believe it. Now, what we're going to be talking about next here, I just want to talk about briefly, which is a port, but a very good port which is Octopath Traveler. This came to PC recently, and something I heard from a lot of people last year was when Octopath Traveler came out, a lot of people were excited, but it was a Nintendo Switch exclusive. Now to me, this is not really an issue. Obviously, I have a Switch, I love my Switch, and I play on my Switch non-freaking stop. But if you did not have one of these $300 machines, it basically locked you out of playing perhaps one of the very best modern RPG experiences. Well, this month they finally dropped it onto Steam, and I've been playing it. It's really good. And I'm being serious here. The Steam version, it's sort of exactly the same. It doesn't really have any new additional features or remixes or anything like that, but I'm still just happy about the fact that they managed to nail the console experience on the PC. It doesn't have any glitches, there's no errors, and I'm actually a little bit excited about what mods may come out in the future. Because to me, that really is one of the most interesting aspects of PC gaming, is how you can tinker with stuff, how you can change stuff. I mean, I would not be shocked if eventually this gets totally reworked so we end up having full-blown Chrono Trigger on the PC or something like that. But as it stands, I really do like Octopath Traveler, and having it on another platform, to me, is always some very good news. But speaking of bad news, we gotta talk about The Sinking City. I love horror, but specifically, I really dig Lovecraftian horror because, so I've read every H.P. Lovecraft book, and a lot of his stuff, it's not about jump scares, it's about paranoia, and specifically, it's about insanity. Within each of his books, he tried to really distill down the idea that there are things that can be so frightening you cannot explain them, where there can be certain elements of this universe that are just so messed up, words cannot convey it. And it seems like they were trying to kind of play with this idea with the Sunken City. You're trying to travel through this town that's mostly flooded, and there's all sorts of Cthulhu-esque badness going on. Weird mutants, people you're trying to help out, and lots of monsters that you need to shoot in a third-person shooter mechanic. But since we are a private detective, it's also about trying to just figure out what the heck is going on. This sense of confusion and just trying to help out those around you is pretty much the backbone of this game. I mean, really, when you get down to it, this is a completely straightforward experience that just says, hey, here's this city, here's this weirdness. And I have to say that if this game did not do so much right, it'd actually be pretty bad. The writing is a little bit goofy sometimes, but the voice acting is so good, and the graphics, the way they managed to convey a lot of the insanity elements, are really smart. I mean, there is some stuff in this game that is so clever, I was completely blown away. They do a lot to make it seem like our character is crazy, or that the universe is crazy, and that we are wacky to participate. That is just one of those elements that is never properly captured in horror games. I feel like when it comes to good horror, you typically have two different camps, which is the stuff that scares you because the monsters are creepy, but they give you a lot of bullets, or the games where they give you almost no bullets, and it sort of feels like a psychological haunted house simulator. The Sinking City really nicely falls right in the middle, and you gotta give it credit for that. Now, the next game I want to talk about is Samurai Showdown. I am not the biggest fan of this franchise. I've played, I think, pretty much all the Samurai Showdown games, but when they said that they were rebooting it, I was kind of like, well, why? It's not that they're terrible, not at all. In fact, it's just that the previous games were good, so it's kind of like, do we really need to restart this? But now that I've had a chance to play it, I can say that they definitely did. Samurai Showdown is a much more simplistic style of fighter. There's not combos, there's not super insane juggling. Instead, it's more about tactics and weaknesses. Finding when your opponent's open and trying to punish those gaps with the biggest attack. It feels, in a way, very much like an old samurai film turned into a video game. You're constantly trying to parry, riposte, to get that next hit, or flip over your opponent and try and nail their biggest opening gap. I like it because, quite frankly, it is bizarre. It's just so far apart from everybody else that it really kind of forges its own style of fun. It sort of manages to craft this really interesting dance of hit and dodge and mistake and death, and even when I lost rounds, I was usually smiling. I mean, it's one of those games where it doesn't feel like it can be broken. It's just so normal and so straightforward. I do feel like even somebody who doesn't play a lot of different fighting games could certainly see the Samurai Showdown reboot and be like, yeah, I totally get it. And that's something that I feel like is something to be really admired. Now, I'll fully say I'm probably not going to be playing this game in another 2 weeks. It's something that I'm glad I played, I'm glad I got to support the developers, but it's definitely not super deep and technical. It's just for people to have a good time with and then move on. Which does sort of make me think about, of course, the Castlevania Collection. Or sorry, the Contra Collection. And I screwed up because just recently I've been playing a bunch of the Castlevania Collection, and now Konami has decided to hit it out of the park once again with Contra. Now, all of these are very good ports that are very nice, and let's face it, it's just a great reason to run and gun. These are, in my opinion, some of the best 2D action games ever from yesteryear. They are retro classics in the very finest sort. In fact, at the very beginning, when I was holding up my Game Boy Advanced, that was me playing Contra even on it. Getting these sort of gaming collections in general is always kind of spectacular, but I really like the stuff that Konami is doing because it seems like they're trying to throw a wide net. They realize that every fan of a particular series has varied taste. Even if you like Castlevania or you like Contra, you like a lot of the different games in a particular series, right? So I really just like that the Contra collection managed to grab so many different gems from throughout this long-running series and put them into one box for a decent price. It's weird to say that in 2019, Konami is doing things right. But what do you think? Have you actually seen any super cool stuff this month that I didn't get a chance to talk about that blew you away? Tell me about it in the comments down below. And if you're somebody who's looking for one more cool game to buy, or maybe you just want to make a wish list of things that you'll catch on sale, be sure to check the comments and give this video a like, because there is so much out there that absolutely deserves your attention. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Woo boy. Well, I'm recording this. I have a bunch of friends in from out of town. So if you heard any banging or anything like that while I was recording this, it's because everybody's trying to pack up. All right. Now I'm going to go play some Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.